Today at Purdue Performance, we're going to be changing the rear brake caliper on our Abarth development car. It's a simple process that you can do at home. Just follow along with our step-by-step guide. If you need to do your front calipers, the job is almost identical, except you don't need to do the handbrake cable, so it's even easier. Let's get the car up in the air, get the wheel off, and we'll show you how to do it. Now that we've got the car up in the air and the wheel off, all we need to do is remove the caliper. To remove the caliper, we need to remove the brake line and the handbrake cable. First, we're going to do the handbrake cable. I'll show you how. So to remove the handbrake cable, we need to unhook it from the bracket here. Make sure the handbrake is released in the car to release the tension from the cable. And then we just need to pull it out of the hook. You may need to use a small flathead screwdriver to pry it if it's a little bit tight. Our one came out without needing a screwdriver. Now that we've unhooked the cable, the rest of the cable runs through a bracket here on the caliper and then runs down to another bracket holding it in place just further back and one more here. We can release it from these brackets to give us a little bit more leverage when pulling it out of the caliper bracket. Now that the cable is loose, we need to pull it through the bracket on the caliper. Using some WD-40 or any other kind of lubricant may help to pull it through if it's a bit tight. There's a rubber boot on the other side, but don't worry if that pulls forward, you can just pop it back on once you've got the cable out. Now that we've got the handbrake cable out, you can see the rubber boot did come off, like I said. But all you have to do is just pop it back over the small metal retaining piece and it's back on. That's ready to reinstall on the new caliper, so we can just move that out of the way for now. What we need to do now is remove the brake line. We're going to crack loose the bolt while the caliper is still attached to the carrier. This will give us more leverage on the bolt. Once we've got that loose, we can then remove the caliper and then remove the line, as it will give us a bit more movement, as it's quite tight down there to get your spanner in. Now that my line is loose, I'm going to undo the two bolts that hold the caliper to the carrier. We've got one at the top here and one just underneath. They're 13mm bolts. The caliper is now completely free from the carrier. We've got both bolts out, the handbrake cable is removed and the brake line is loose. All we need to do now is remove the actual caliper. It may be quite tight still in place because there's still pressure in the braking system. So you may need to knock it loose. You could use a socket extension and a hammer or a flathead screwdriver to help pry the caliper away from the carrier. And there you can see the caliper is now completely free from the carrier. Now we just need to loosen off the brake line and then we can remove it completely. And there the line is loose. You may lose some of your fluid out of the line at this point. We're not too worried about that, as we're going to be changing all the fluid anyway. The brake pads are still in place on the brake disc in the carrier. We're not going to be changing the pads or the disc today, so we're just going to put the new caliper straight back on over the old pads. We're going to just repeat the process, but in reverse order. So the first thing we need to do is attach the line to the caliper. At this point, I've got the line hand tight. We're going to tighten it up fully once we've got the caliper back installed on the carrier, as we'll have more leverage on the spanner. It'll be a lot easier to turn. We can now put the caliper back over the brake pads. As it's a new caliper, the piston is all the way out, so it should go over nice and easy with no resistance. We just line up the bolt holes at the top and bottom and put them back in from the old one. We can then tighten up the bolts, which are 13mm. Now that the caliper's reinstalled and tightened onto the carrier, we just need to tighten up the brake line. We're going to do this before we put the handbrake cable back on, as it will give us a little more room to work around the space and get our spanner in to make sure it's nice and tight. Now we need to reinstall the handbrake cable. It's again just a repeat process in reverse. Get the cable. We won't put the cable back through the brackets that are holding it here. We're now going to reinstall the cable back into its place. Make sure it's hooked around here. It should be fairly loose at the moment until the handbrake is pulled and everything will tighten up. Now that we've got the cable back in the caliper, we can put the rest of the cable back in the two brackets behind that hold it in place. That's now everything we need to do to replace the caliper. Now all we need to do is bleed the brake system. We've got another video on our YouTube channel that goes through this in detail. So if you want to see that process, check that video out.